The first stop of the LZ World Tour is right around the corner, May 12th and 13th in Englishtown, New Jersey. We are going out to Raceway Park. If you haven't seen the flyer, all the homies are going to be there. It's a fun event, but it's also competition. And I've told you guys that I want to bring the 4-rotor there, knowing that it's a new build. I'm a little bit weary that it might have a few little mechanical issues, so I thought I'd bring a backup. And what other backup to bring than the good old FD S15? We're gonna unpack this car, its current status, and hopefully get to tune and drive this car in the video. But a refresher for the format of what you can expect to see at LZ World Tour. We've got a wide array of drivers. We've got some pros, some guys that may be somewhat new to competition, and what we did at the Invitational was really cool. We basically do qualifying, but rather than seating a bracket where the worst driver goes up against the best driver for their first battle, we essentially have a bottom 16 bracket where the drivers that may not be as familiar with competition have a chance to actually have a really good battle, and then there's a couple last chance spots. So basically like the top 3 from that bottom 16 bracket get to make it into the Saturday competition, which will be the top 16. And in addition to that, we do a bunch of fun fantasy battles of stuff that you guys want to see. But more than anything, it is an event that is for the drivers, for you guys to put on the best show possible. We've got VIP slots if you want a chance to meet some of your favorite drivers or car builders, but as you can see, I'm trying to bring out the best for you guys, and the old FD car is one of them. If you don't remember Irwindale, the last event that I did with the old FD car, torched a cylinder, lost a motor, and we actually had it back together months ago, and it was on the dyno. I don't think it ever made it to YouTube because we ran into some pretty large mechanical issues, and then it just kind of got thrown in the back burner until we had a reason to fix it. Rather than just graze over the problem, I'm gonna try to take a detailed approach as I've been doing in past videos. Let me know if you guys like it, hate it. I always read your comments, so give me some feedback, but let's dive in. Issue number 1, which has always been a problem with this car once we went to a big turbo, was boost creep. And if you aren't familiar with how an externally gated turbocharged car works, I'm gonna explain it for you guys with a manifold that I have on the table. This was actually an old one, maybe from a 1J. Actually, no, this was an old 2J manifold I used to run. Exhaust gases go through these runners into the collector, and they spool the hot side of the turbo, which then spools the cold side, which pushes air into the engine. And then you have a wastegate that lives here and helps you regulate the exhaust gas pressure going into the turbo to control how much boost it makes. Now at low RPM, this is essentially closed, forcing the air into the turbo to spool and make boost. But once you hit your target boost pressure, a vacuum line tells the wastegate to open and allows it to divert the exhaust gas away from the turbo so you don't overspin it and put too much boost pressure into the engine. Boost creep happens when you aren't able to control that exhaust pressure inside the manifold. And if, let's say, you're trying to target 20 PSI of boost, it will continue to add more and more boost no matter what you do until you're in like 30 plus at red line. Back pressure is not good for an engine, and not being able to control boost is also not good for an engine. Switching to a bigger AR hot side can help the problem because the bigger AR essentially gives more room for the exhaust gas to bypass the turbine wheel. But on the manifold that we have on the car, there are 2 other things that we think were the main contributors of the problem. Now, because of space constraints, there's really only one place that the wastegate could be located. And going up from a 45mm wastegate to a 60mm wastegate would probably solve the issue, but because of packaging constraints, we aren't able to fit it. We were able to go up 5mm to TurboSmart's 50mm gate, but Jamie, who was tuning the car last, led us to believe that there may have been something else that was contributing to that creep issue. Now, when you build a manifold, there is a peak in the center from where all the runners merge. And he's seen on certain cars with certain manifold shapes that if that peak is too high, the exhaust velocity from certain runners can still get through to the turbo instead of being let out and pushed away from the turbo through the wastegate. And lucky enough, when Johan made this manifold, he used a billet collector that has quite a bit of flat pad, so he was able to grind down a bunch of that peak, which should help. I really wanted this manifold to work because it literally transformed the sound of this car. I think when I last drove it in FD, even though with a huge turbo, it's probably my least favorite to drive, it sounded better than it ever has. So we did go down from a 1200 horsepower capable turbo to a G40 900. The G40 is because we have the bigger flange on this manifold, otherwise it would have been on a G35 900. My all-time favorite turbo for a 2JZ and for a lot of other applications. Spools super fast, makes good power. This thing should probably make like 750, 800 at full tilt, which is more than enough for what I'm gonna use it for. I don't plan to need to ever make over 1,000 with this car. And with a 3-liter, I think the G35 900 will be much more fun to drive. Will be less effort and headache to run the car since I won't need nitrous as a spool aid, so it should be a bit more reliable and easy to run. But funny enough, in Formula Drift, I actually just drove the car with a ton of boost creep, even with the giant turbo when it was making well over 1,000 horsepower, because, well, we didn't have time or an option. So I could have just said screw it and continue to drive the car, but there was another issue in addition to the boost creep, and that was trigger related. On pretty much every engine, you have what's called a trigger wheel that is on the crankshaft, and basically what happens is this spins around with the engine. There's a little sensor sensor that picks up these teeth and it tells the ECU where the crankshaft position is relative to the cam position. If there's an issue with one of these teeth or the sensor, the ECU sensor is what's called a trigger error, could make a big loud pop and bang, mess with your rev limit, could do a lot of weird stuff that's not good. And what we found was the trigger wheel that was on the new motor for this car, we were able to put on our lathe, turn it, and realize that there's actually some discrepancies in the teeth of the trigger wheel. Now this was an aftermarket one that we had on it, not an OEM one, so it's possible that some of those gaps were so big that it was throwing trigger errors and making the car break up and face weird stuff. After redoing the wiring, we concluded that was probably the issue after we went through all the wiring on the car and couldn't figure anything out. So the car now is going back to an OEM trigger setup, which on 2Js people run well over 1,000 horsepower with no issues with, because it had some fancy aftermarket triggers and sensors that I don't really think are necessary now with the car's power goals and intended usage. We got a little bit of time to kill while we're waiting for Jamie to become available so we can hop on TeamViewer, make sure everything looks good when we run it in on the dyno. So we're gonna pop over to the Mark IV Supra. It is the last week to get entered for a chance to win that car, where every $5 you spend on lzmfg.com or with drifthq.com will get you entered for a chance to win the car and $20,000 cash. Also, I realize I caused some confusion. Not only do you get entered using the DriftHQ website, but if you also reach out to our sales team over the phone, over an email, you'll still get entries for a chance to win. But we got a lot of progress happening on that car since the giveaway ends in a week, and a lot of cool stuff going on with it. Track. For this car, we'll be using Radium's beautiful in-tank hanger setup. For this specific application, we'll be using 2 pumps, which should be more than sufficient for the 750 horsepower that we'll be making. But as always, Radium keeps making beautiful solutions for all the 90s cars that we're building. In addition to this in-tank hanger, we'll also be utilizing their brackets that allow us to mount the aftermarket fuel lines underneath the chassis, as well as the bracket for their fuel filter and a couple other goodies in the engine bay. Over at DriftHQ, we deal with Radium products every single day, so if you need help getting something sorted for a new build, make sure to reach out to our guys and also get entered for a chance to win this bad boy. For this car, we're using Clutchmaster's 850 series twin disc. It's actually the same clutch that I run in my E36, and we've had great luck with it. I've actually had Clutchmaster's 1000 series on my V160 when it was in my Chaser. It was really good for the street, held the power down, but knowing that this car is not gonna be making 1,000 horsepower, I chose to go with a slightly softer clutch, just making sure the car would be easy to drive and still have no problem supporting the power. Again, we deal a lot with Clutchmasters over at DriftHQ, so if you need help speccing out the right clutch for your build, make sure to drop a line to our team, get a great clutch, and also get entered for a chance to win the Supra.
Okay, so we finished the Supra fuel pump and battery relocation. We got her nice mounted in the back here under the carpet and spare tire cover. We got the Radium top hat here with our 2 fuel pumps. We got 8 AN feed and 6 AN return. And then we got 1 relay per fuel pump here. And then we got the battery mounted in the back. We ran the cable into the car. And we got the rest of the interior all fitted back and nice.
The fact that it fits in there like nothing happened.
I'm pretty psyched on how good it came out. So
Sick.
boom, all done, ready to make 800 horsepower.
All right, Mike is being promoted to chop
technician.
I'm one of those like jacks, the trans jacks.
Oh man! Top and bang, baby. Take and bake. So a reminder that the purpose of this dyno was not to final tune the car, but was to verify that we didn't have any trigger issues and verify that we didn't have boost creep. And the good news is we were able to go to the full 9,000 RPM and boost held rock steady at 21 pounds, which I found out was a little bit more than what I wanted. So at 21 pounds, the car made over 800 horsepower, which leads me to believe we were probably overspinning the turbo. But what I can see is compared to the G40 1150, which is what we had the car on first with this new motor, we were able to pick up, let's just say 100 wheel from 4,000 to 5,000 RPM, which will make a difference. But I want to remind you that that G40 1150 was even smaller than the G42 1200 that I was running in Formula Drift. That turbo on the 3-liter I wasn't a fan of, mainly just because anytime I got off or on throttle, I had to basically like rev limit or dump it to get the power to come on, unless I was running nitrous, which helped somewhat, but we couldn't control boost. And I don't want to run nitrous on this car because if I'm taking it to fun events, it's just more stuff to worry about. You got to make sure the bottle's at the right temperature, you got to change them. Or if I can just put a smaller turbo, be happy with the car in the 700s for horsepower, I'll get to have a lot of fun and the car will still sound sick. But just as an experiment, we tried holding the gate shut. This is like 26, 27 PSI, then tapering down to 23 at redline. And you can see the amount of mid-range that I was able to gain by doing that was astronomical. So like at 5,000 RPM, we're talking about an extra 300 horsepower, which just goes to show the power of having that smaller compressor, how much earlier it can come on, and also how much better the transient response is gonna be because we have a smaller wheel that we're trying to get to spin up each time. So right now, the car's in a drivable, driftable state, but I am waiting for Jamie to come down in 24 to 48 hours. In the meantime, he said the car's good to do some donuts, a couple test rips, so that way we can diagnose and make sure everything is solid on the chassis side. The car's hasn't been driven in a while. Now that it's lower, I have a feeling I might want to change some of the rear suspension geometry. I don't remember how the front angle feels, and now that I've driven a lot of different cars, I might want to play with that. So we're gonna take the car out, and it's gonna be my first time ripping it, literally since Irwindale, just to shake it down, make sure everything's good, and capture some footage for you guys. Even though I feel like this car didn't end on the most positive note, I still have so many good memories with this thing. And it really is a really nice car, so it feels really, really good to be sitting back in this thing and know that not only am I gonna idle, I'll be able to actually feel it again. So I'm gonna do a couple pulls, see how the new turbo setup feels, and then maybe we'll give a couple little slide-a-roos and see how she does.
Definitely better than it was, but I still miss the 3.4. It misses. It's good when it comes on, but man, I just got spoiled from the E36 setup. I'm gonna try to slide and see how it feels, but it sounds so good.
Oh yeah, it sounds insane.
I miss how this thing sounds.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me purposely doing like the little ba 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 ba. It's really snappy, so once I'm above where the turbo comes on, it's way better than it's ever been. I just need to get it up there. And I think having such a long first gear right now makes it feel a lot laggier than it would be otherwise, because we probably have like a 60, 70 mile an hour first gear in the car right now.
Damn.
Definitely have too long of a gear ratio for the compound.
Yeah?
Yeah, like I'm stuck between second and first gear, but we're off to a good start, so I feel good about that.
Hell yeah.
It sounded really good. I think overall for a car I haven't driven in a while, it felt pretty good. The biggest takeaway is we still need to figure out what's going on with the power steering that's causing some shuddering. It's always been something we fought with this car, and after hearing and being a little bit more experienced with electric power steering setups, that might be the move for this car long term. Power-wise, I'm really happy with the transient response of the turbo, but I think ultimately we have a motor with oversized valves, huge camshafts, a bunch of custom shit in it to be able to spin high RPM, and I'm trying to ask it to do stuff that it's not intended to. I think ultimately if I want to be really happy with this car, I just put the same engine package that I had in the E36, because that 3.4 with the G35 1050 is like berserk, so now that I'm benchmarking everything to it, it's good, it's really good, and I think I can drive it competitively. It's just, you know, when you've experienced something better, it's hard not to wish that you had the best engine setup and everything. But either way, it sounds absolutely mental. The turbo setup seems way happier than the old setup. I definitely don't need nitrous. I guess for the next iteration, after Jamie comes out and does the final tune on it, which it actually ran great. I was watching air fuel the whole time that I was drifting, and there were a few rich spots, which is safe, but it's leaving a little bit more on the table for both power and spool, so he could probably pull a little bit of fuel out. It'll be a little bit more responsive. But overall, like transient, I'm happy with, and then switching the gearing to be a little bit shorter, I think will help a lot, especially around like a tight course like the compound. A lot of you guys are probably wondering, like, what's the ultimate goal for this car? It's nothing, I don't really know in particular, if I'm being honest. I don't know that I'll ever want to take this car back to Formula Drift, but I do want to drive it. I am planning to take it to both the World Tour and to Hyperfest. Other events this year I'm not sure of, but until the E36 is back up and running, there's a good chance that you might see me competing in something with this car. It's definitely competitive, it's a blast to drive, and I feel like it's a good representation of the LZ brand. I know it's a special car to a lot of you guys. I'm excited to see it back running. Even though it's not to its fullest potential yet, it definitely feels very, very good to be back in the seat of this thing, spinning tires, burning smoke, and in the very near future, we will see more of this car, because I guess it'll probably be in the next video. Jamie will be down here, we'll be tuning the Mark IV Supra giveaway car, we'll be tuning this, cleaning up a couple other things, and then I'm just trying to get as much stuff dialed in as I can before I leave for a week or two on a trip. Then I'll be back, and then we got the World Tour. So big smiles, and I'll see you guys soon.
As Adam LZ comes off the big bang, massive angle from him, rips into that second outside zone, into the third outside zone. See him turning back on the smoke machine, approaching that inside clip, nails it, and that final outside zone.
Like good perspective of where he's going in an 87.
An 87 for Adam LZ, and 87.
The car sounds good, but it's like that last 1,000 RPM. I feel like I'm hitting like the Mario Kart special meter, and I just want it to live there. But I also know that this turbo isn't happy there.
Yeah.
But it also sounds really good.
Yeah, down low they kind of sound like tractors, but up top.
Yeah, but this thing, like that last 1,000 RPM,
something special happens. I don't know what it is.
Shit's spicy.
Yeah. Hell yeah.